We have a pretty full agenda. The goal is that we're going to be able to give you a lot of great information about our DSW program and certainly answer any questions that you may have for us during the session. We are fortunate that we have two of our DSW actually our two DSW candidates who are graduating this coming May, Melissa Elliott Brogan and Erica Garcia. Soon to be doctors. They're in the final stages of their degrees and actually working on capstone implementation. So they're here to give you a little bit of information from the student perspective, as well as tell you just a little about their projects. And certainly you're welcome to ask them any questions as well as we move forward this evening. So our agenda, we're going to start by giving a very high level overview of our DSW program. We're going to then talk about why a DSW and the why in particular UB, giving you some really good information about our program. We know there are a lot of different programs out there, and we always, when I talk to students, myself and really our admissions team, as well as other students, it's really about fit, what you're looking for in a DSW program, because there's lots and lots of variances in what these programs look like. We're then going to give a course overview where you'll have the opportunity to hear a couple capstone project examples, because this is what we consider our culminating project of our DSW program. We're then going to briefly just go over a DSW versus a PhD, because the other thing I find when we talk to students is some are trying to determine is a DSW or a PhD the best fit for me. Then Tara's going to go over some excellent information on the application process, the requirements, and then tips for funding. So getting started in really just some very high level, very overview of our program. We are a part-time program, fully online, and it's 39 credits. So our program is designed to be completed within 3 years. It's very structured. Students move through the program in a cohort model. They take 2 classes per semester, with the exception of their last semester. And it's really, our program is really set up or geared towards experienced social work practitioners who really want to advance their own professional practice, as well as, you'll see our note, bridge that gap between research and practice. Because our key aspect of our program, or really what we're known for, is the application of implementation science. And I recognize when I say that term that might be new to many of you. Implementation science just doesn't look at the outcomes of an intervention, implementing an intervention. Really what it gets at is trying to overcome those barriers to implementation before you actually move towards those, and thoughtfully and using science, developing strategies to help increase the uptake of programs and services. I myself was an agency director for many years before I went back for my PhD. At that point, there really weren't too many DSW programs around. And that's something we saw a lot within our agency as well. We had a lot of great programs and services. Sometimes it didn't work quite as well as we hoped when we moved to implementing. So yeah, that's really a very quick overview of implementation science. But I'd like to mention that I encourage you to look into that a little bit more if you're thinking of our program, to make sure that's a fit for you. The other things that I want to mention, well, this is the key aspect. We also infuse or incorporate our signature pedagogy, our trauma-informed and human rights perspective. So as we look at that intervention, thinking about adaptations that might be needed to help overcome past trauma or help individuals who may have experienced past trauma to actually address that and, again, make implementation more successful. And we also use some advanced digital technologies that I'll talk a little bit more about as we move forward. So why a DSW? We actually launched our program in fall of 2019, and that was at a point, and this continues to be the trend, is to align with practice doctorates in other allied health professions. So if we think of nursing, PT, OT, many of these disciplines have formed a DSW or a practice doctorate. And that's really one of the main reasons that you may want to consider that, so that we're better aligned with those other health professionals. We also recognize that advanced training that is provided through a practice doctorate, a DSW, is becoming more and more essential in many areas. One, being at the same place as other practice doctorate professionals, but also elevating what you're doing in practice. And we really believe that those within our program in particular, trained in implementation science, coupled with that trauma-informed perspective, will be in particularly high demand moving forward, really to help bridge that gap between research and more effectively make sure that we're doing a good job implementing what we need to in practice. We are, as I mentioned, when we launched back in fall of 2019, there were 13 programs. There are now nearly 40 known DSW programs throughout the country. And as I noted at the beginning, there's a lot of variance in what those programs look like. I'd say maybe about 40% are what we call clinical programs, where individuals that are enrolled really want to elevate their clinical skills. And as I talk to applicants, we are not what I'd say a clinical program, but you can advance your own clinical practice through the application of implementation science. And I think as our students get into their examples, that will help really clarify that a little bit better. I also want to mention within the SUNY system, State University of New York, we are at this point the first and only SUNY to offer a DSW program. Okay, so why UB? Why think about UB? Because again, lots of different programs out there. We're in the top 10% of CSWE accredited programs. I want to preface that that's in relation to MSW programs. At this point, accreditation through CSWE for practice doctorate programs is just moving forward. We're in the process of applying for accreditation. There are 4 programs that were pilots that have become accredited, and now they've actually moved that process on to other schools. So again, as I referenced that top 10%, that's in relation to MSW programs, but we are certainly moving forward with applying for accreditation, and we positioned ourselves through the years quite well to do that. I do want to mention we are accredited, but we are accredited through middle states, as many DSW programs are. What that means is we have regional accreditation. I do need to report annually as program director on our program, but we don't at this point have CSWE accreditation. So why UB? In the center, we've talked a little bit about this, our focus on implementation science. And this is a really exciting time to think about using implementation science in social work, because we want to make sure that what we're doing is effective in preventing and alleviating conditions, as well as increasing the health and well-being. We at the same time know there's a number of gaps between research and practice, and that's actually what we're there to do, is help to overcome those gaps, as well as infuse things like our trauma-informed perspective, racial equity into this, so that we can overcome some of those barriers populations may have in accessing those interventions through the use of adaptations. In addition, our trauma-informed and human rights perspective, we talked a little bit about that. What we haven't talked much about yet, that I do want to preface, is our use of digital technologies, in particular, professional collaboration networks. So all of our students do receive some training in using enhanced digital technologies. They're exposed to virtual reality. They're exposed to ways to help build their practice through the use of tech. But more importantly, what all of our students are doing is forming what's called a global professional collaboration network, where they're able to, we use that at the beginning of our program to help really with the learning, thinking about implementation science, or methods, or as they're looking at pieces of implementation science. But the goal of this is so that our students can also position themselves as global experts as they continue to advance in the program, as well as after they graduate from the program, to help really build that network. And I know that's also a key piece of implementation science, is that collaboration or that network building. So I do want to turn it over to both Erica and Melissa to see why UB when you decided to choose our program.
I can chime in first. Sorry, my computer didn't want to unmute me. So I chose UB. I am not from the Buffalo region originally. I do live in Western New York now, but I'm from Fort Lauderdale originally, and I got my undergraduate and graduate in Florida. And I've been in the field for a long time, and I had really considered getting a PhD, but I knew it would mean stepping away from the work that I do and I'm very passionate about. So when I saw that UB had a DSW program, and all the things Dr. Bakk has already hit on, that it is meant for professionals to expand their practice, it seemed like the right type of fit. But then I still kicked the idea around probably for 2 more years, thinking, well, is that really going to be something that mattered to me? Is it going to do anything? So I came to this very type of session that they were doing. And when I learned about the implementation science piece, is really what sold me that UB's program is what made sense for me. I work in foster care and child welfare. I've been in the child welfare realm for 15 years, and I see that gap every day. We are always working hard to try and support all the kids and families, but evidence based practices often fall by the wayside. So that was why UB really resonated with me, as well as the reputation that the school has in this region. We work with them for interns, for MSWs all the time. And so I see the work they're doing. So that's what brought me to UB.
That's awesome. First, I want to say hello to everybody. Welcome. Just take that moment to think about you're at this point in your career, you're at this point in your journey where this is where you are thinking about. That's just such an incredible step to take. So I want to say welcome, healers and change agents. Much like many of you, I sat in that seat and was curious about what else I could do in my career, how else I might be able to make an impactful change. What drew me to UB is the fact that University of Buffalo is a trauma-informed program. That was really big for me. It aligns deeply with my professional and personal path and commitment to advancing not only social work practice, but just in my humanity. I've been in the field for over 2 decades. I'm in the clinical side of social work, definitely working in micro and meso capacity, but kept seeing those gaps. Every time I come up against some concern or challenge, it was a gap. And, in my attempts to align better with community partnerships, there was still limited access. And in my conversations, they led me more to saying, this was something that I might have to go back to school for, right? I might have to start, looking at the research. And it wasn't just about practice, it was about how we could synthesize those two different paths. So that's what the DSW is about. It's about taking practice and research and trying to find better ways of conducting what we do, right, in the social work realm. So for this program, I want a program that emphasized not just clinical knowledge, but also leadership, implementation science, and the tools to translate research into practice. So UB does offer that. This program is incredible in providing opportunity for growth, for challenge, for questioning, what we do and why we do it. It gave me a place to really explore some more of what I want in the field, and I've learned so much more beyond that. So the beautiful part about this program is coming in with this knowledge base and then unlearning some things and then relearning some others and testing your limits, which is something I really was hopeful for, but got so much more than I had started. So at my core, my decision wasn't about just growth. It was about opportunity to elevate my voice in the profession. The DSW does that. I wanted to contribute to original research. I wanted to build sustainable strategies and strengthen partnerships in our communities. So hopefully, if you have questions, reach out. But that's a little bit about me and why I'm here at UB.
Thank you, Missy and Erica. What a great, yeah, thank you for sharing that. What a great summary of why you chose UB. Thank you. And yeah, so What I would like to do now is I want to talk a little bit about the capstone project. First, our curriculum, and then talk a little bit about capstone. To give you a snapshot of what our curriculum looks like. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you'll take 2 courses each semester for a total of 13. And you progress through the program as well with a cohort. And I do see we've got a lot of questions potentially in chat. We usually like to get through this, and then we will definitely open it up to your questions. So year 1, your fall semester, you do begin by taking a course in needs assessment, thinking about what your problem is, a potential intervention, what's the need in the community, as well as a seminar in trauma and human rights. As mentioned, that perspective is infused throughout the program. As you move into spring year 1, this is your first implementation science course when you're looking at individual level barriers, and also a course on evaluating and using evidence-based practices in social work. As you move into year 2, you take your second implementation science course. This time what you would be looking at organizational characteristics and thinking about implementing those evidence-based practices. At the same time, you take your first methods course. As you move into spring year 2, this is when you begin the capstone project experience. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. And then as well, turn it over to Missy and Erica to tell you a little bit about what that might look like, or what it looks like for them, to give you some ideas of how this can be used. So the first capstone course is thinking about your problem, your intervention, where you're going to head, as well as you move into capstone 2, designing your strategies. So as we think about capstone, there are 2 really big milestones. One is the completion of capstone 1 and 2, which is your proposal as well as your IRB. This is when you're going to propose what it is I want to do within my agency. That then moves students into candidacy, and after that point, they begin implementation. So thinking about year 2, your 2-year courses would be spring and then summer, capstone 1 and 2. At the same time, you would take a second methods course as well as your elective. The elective that we offer through the UB School of Social Work is teaching and pedagogy. You certainly could take another elective through UB or the School of Social Work with a couple stipulations. It does need to be taught by someone holding a doctorate, and you would also need approval from your faculty advisor to do that. We do not take transfer credits because the goal of our program is to have everything very structured and very aligned towards the overall outcomes of applying implementation science to practice. Final year, and this is actually where both Missy and Erica are, is fall semester, where you move into implementing your intervention, as well as assessing your strategies, and then taking a course on dissemination, spread, scale, and sustainability. Because as I like to tell students, your capstone is really a small piece of what you're going to do in your whole career. So we want to focus as well on how can I continue this intervention? How can I sustain it? How can I scale it up? And that course is exactly designed to do that. Final semester is when you're then evaluating the data that you have in relation to your strategies. Did they work? What do I need to improve on? As well as if you're assessing your intervention, how well did that intervention work? So the other milestone with that is a final paper that is fairly lengthy that talks about your project, the implementation, as well as what those results were and your sustainability. Our students are also required to have 2 other products as part of this, and there's a lot of variance in relation to that. It can be an abstract, it can be an outline for a larger paper, it can be a manual. We'd like to give a lot of discretion to our students into what that looks like so it does fit with their future trajectory. Okay, so a little bit about capstone before we hear a couple great examples. As noted, it's a 4-semester project process. It's really a culmination of and integration of all your coursework before that. So the courses are setting you up to complete this project. It is completed at your agency or a volunteer site, and you do need access to a target population, and you need to attest to that. We do have a form that Tara will talk a little bit more about, and that's required as part of the application process. A note, that's not saying that you can do whatever you want or that you even know what you want. We just want to make sure that you do have access to a population because that's such a big piece of our program. It is designed to further the work within the community agencies. So, and this is really just how the sequence builds. You begin capstone 1 by doing a lit review on your problem, your intervention, and begin thinking about your strategies. You then design those strategies that you're going to use, as well as your methods for data collection. At that point, you'll also submit to UB's IRB. After approval of this, you then move to candidacy where you implement your program. You begin testing those strategies, seeing what your outcomes look like. And then the final capstone is really evaluating, disseminating, thinking about how you're going to continue to sustain your intervention. So again, a snapshot of what that project looks like. So now I'm going to turn it over to both Erica and Missy, and they're going to tell you a little bit more about their projects because there's lots of variances in how students approach this. So I think hearing a couple real examples will help to think about how this can be done.
You want to go, Erica? You want? It's
Uh,
up to you.
Yeah, I can go and then you can. Okay. Okay. So I just do want to take a moment to say, one of the things that is really best about UB and the way this program is structured is that the DSW team is really always looking to make the program stronger, and just the course outline has shifted since when Missy and I started to address those things that the students felt would be helpful for us. So I just want to give that shout out. That is a big part of the collaboration here. So that is not my project at all. So I mentioned briefly before, I work in child welfare. So the name of my project is Healing the Loss That We Create. And it is implementing trauma-focused CBT for ambiguous loss in foster care, which is a lot of words. But the idea that I am focusing on, I work in an agency. I am actually an executive director at my agency. And as I mentioned, we saw these gaps all the time. You could see these gaps. We have a clinical team, we have caseworkers, we have all these people always trying to do the best for our kids and families that we work with, but they weren't really using evidence-based practices. And then I've also seen OCFS or, the county or ourselves roll out things that just don't stick. So I wanted to make sure that if we were going to be addressing this problem, ambiguous loss is very big in foster care. It's all those losses that aren't related to death is the fastest way to explain that. Kids who come into our program have loss surrounding them, and it's complicated for all of them. So we needed to better address that. So we're implementing trauma-focused CBT. And my project is not necessarily studying TFCBT. There's lots of evidence for that. We know that works. We know it works for grief and for foster kids. That is something that's very well supported. But my research, my project is about how do we make this stick in the fast-paced, complicated world that is child welfare. So I just was leading today an educational session, and those are not like trainings on how to do TFCBT. They are to give everyone in the entire organization the same foundation. So that's the first step of my implementation, and there's surveys and measures. And that's the sort of thing when we're talking about implementation science, I've been describing it to staff as the science of how do we make things stick? How do we get this to actually stay? Because they've all seen, I like the responses, they've all seen how hard we try to roll new things out and how easily a crisis happens or something important comes up and it falls by the wayside. So that is really my project in a nutshell. So the population I'm working with then, yes, we work with children, but for my study, it's the staff, it's the people at the agency who are participating. I think my project looks very different than Missy's. And we actually have a really good dichotomy of like, she's in a different setting than mine. I'm very agency based. We work with lots of kids and families, but but I have a lot of staff that I'm trying to support in an implementation. And Missy works in private practice, so I'll let her explain her world in a second. But I think my approach to the implementation science is I think it's a good way for people to wrap their minds around it when it's something that you're not used to yet. It is, we know these things should be done. We know TSCBT works. How do we get it to actually stay? And that is what I'm trying to do in the fast-paced and ever-changing world of foster care. And it's been going well, but we just started. So that was a very high-level overview of my project.
Hey, Erin. So, yes, I work in private practice, and through some of those gaps that I've seen, I wanted to work with the providers. So I'm working on a Heal the Healer series. Right now, more than ever, a lot of us are being taxed in ways that we never thought imaginable, right? We're working with populations that are under extreme levels of stress, duress, and challenges. So, how do we continue to fortify our resilience? What do we do to get ourselves back to a place where we can exhale? So, my capstone focuses on the psychological impacts of trauma in exposed work for social workers and allied professionals. Specifically, I examine how secondary traumatic stress, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, empathy fatigue, and burnout show up in practice and how they're often conflated in the literature. My belief is that without first being able to define what's going on for us, there's not really an evidenced way or an effective way to treat it. So, first and foremost, just defining what's going on. And then from this foundation, I actually constructed an evidence-informed intervention called the Holistic Resilience Recharge, or HER. This program directly addresses the four challenges that I've derived from literature through thematic analysis and through my literature reviews. That these four impacts occur most frequently to people working in these trauma exposed occupational roles. They are procrastination, emotional dysregulation, boundary erosion, and health neglect, health impacts. The intervention has its roots in CBT and DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, mindfulness, grounding practices, and is going to be delivered in a one-day workshop that offers CEUs for participation. In order to evaluate this impact, right, the project is going to be a mixed method study. It's going to use quantitative and qualitative questions and interview to measure those burnout, secondary traumatic stress impacts, and the resilience. This is all done encompassing through an implementation science lens. So you've heard that term mentioned throughout this presentation. And let me just share with you, implementation science is where the field of social work is headed. And UB is the only program that offers this embedded into the curriculum. Other programs definitely offer perhaps a course because I'm in contact with other DSWs, other program leaders. UB is where we're on the cutting edge working with the Center of Implementation in progressing the social work field to be on par with other disciplines. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes and a lot of movement in the field. This is the place to start that. So, and what is implementation science in a nutshell? Just to be brief, think of it like you have a problem and you have something you want to do to solve it, but you don't know how to get it there. So think my problem, I'm hungry, my solution, food, but how do I prepare the food? How do I eat the food? How do I deliver the food? So I know it's a little silly of an example, but if it breaks it down and starts, getting people to think about it, how exciting this could be, so be it. So basically, ultimately, the goal of my capstone is twofold: to provide practical tools for social workers and allied professionals to sustain well-being and to be able to contribute a model that people can replicate with ease in their goings-ons and in their work and field to fill that gap between research, implementation, and everyday practice. So a little bit about me again. Any questions, please reach out and let me know. And hopefully see you here at the school.
Thank you so much. Great overviews. And I love your examples of implementation science because it's sometimes hard to wrap your head around. And I also, yeah, just great example, Missy. And Eric, I liked your how to get it to stick or stay. So I haven't heard that before, but yeah, I like that. Just a note too, mentioning that about using implementation science in social work, Missy and another graduating student are working with myself and a faculty member on a paper in relation to that. So we're hoping to move that forward this academic year. All right, I just have a couple more slides. DSW versus a PhD. Very quick overview, and these are in relation to our programs. Our DSW part-time, it's a fully online program where our PhD is full-time on campus. Length, 3 years. It's very fixed, very structured. PhD can take 4 to 6. Our DSW program is self-funded, and Tara will be talking to you a little bit about funding in her slides. PhD is tuition waivers and research internships. The goal of DSW program, it's really advancing practice leadership, thinking about that implementation science, collaboration, stakeholder input. PhD, if you're interested, you really want to be at a Research One university doing high-level research, I would say a PhD is a much better fit. Final notes that I have before I turn it over to talk about application is requirements. So one is the virtual orientation, which will be on August 13th and 14th. All students, before they begin the program, are required to attend that virtual orientation. And we found that students really enjoy doing this. You'll have opportunity to hear from faculty, from students, to think about ways to be successful in your doctoral program. So yeah, we've gotten some really good responses from students in that. And then also, while we're an online program, we're a fully online, you are required to participate in select virtual sessions. So on average, each class per semester, you would attend between 3 and 4 virtual sessions for a total of 6 to 8, and you'll know those session dates well in advance. So I do my best within several months of the semester beginning to find out when those will be hosted. Once you get to capstone, you're working very closely with your faculty member, so you have the ability to work with them in scheduling those. So I'm going to now turn it over to Tara because she, I know, has a lot of information about the application process.
Thank you, Dr. Bakk. So yes, again, my name is Tara. If you have questions as you're working on the application, I would be your contact person. You can certainly email me at any time or schedule a 20-minute one-on-one session to really just talk about everything in more detail after tonight. But here are some items that all DSW applicants must have. So you need to have graduated with your MSW degree from a CSWE accredited institution or the international equivalent, not a master's degree in other areas. So it does have to be Master of Social Work. We also require a minimum of a 3.0 GPA for your MSW degree, and then it's recommended to have a 3.0 from your undergraduate degree. In the application process, you are going to submit unofficial transcripts for all schools attended at both the undergraduate and graduate level. So if you're unsure of some prior coursework that you took long ago at the undergrad level, that would be good to look at again and let us know if you have questions. There is a minimum 2 years post MSW direct practice requirement that starts counting back. So if you plan to start fall 2026, you must have graduated by 2024. So we're counting back from the start date of the actual program. The more experience you have, the better. It will only strengthen your application, but the minimum would be 2 years. We will also need a copy of your licensure. So there are specific instructions on our website for that. Some individuals may be working in social work positions that don't require you to have a license. We would just want a written statement explaining why you don't have licensure or if you're currently applying for that. Otherwise, you would just upload a copy inside the application portal with the copy of the license. And then we have a new form that is regarding the capstone project. We want to make sure that students have access to a place where they can implement that capstone project. It's an attestation form. So you'll sign this form to attest that you have access to a target population, and that would be used for your capstone project. You'll be naming the agency where you intend to implement your capstone and your relationship to that agency, whether it's your current employer or your private practice, or what that relationship would be. So that's built right into the application portal. If you have questions on any of the pieces, again, I'm here to help out. And next we'll look at the timeline. So applications are open right now. You could technically, if you have any energy after the Zoom tonight, just start creating an application, a username, password, put in your academic background, and one, so you could start that now. The application deadline is coming up actually in March. So it's a little later this year, March 2nd, 2026, to be able to start in the fall. And we'll send out decisions soon after that, usually at the latest by April each year. So that's a typical overview of the timeline. You can start your application now, but you wouldn't find out probably till around April. So here is the application process. It is all electronic. So right on your website, or our website, socialwork.buffalo.edu, you'll be able to start the application. There are a few things you'll need. So the first is 3 recommenders. These can be from professional or academic sources. So it could be faculty from your MSW program, any field educators you worked with, a supervisor from a professional role, or even work colleagues are acceptable. It can be a mix of those, or all 3 professional if it's been a number of years since you've completed your MSW program. That's understandable. Just make sure it's one of those sources, either academic or professional. Please do not ask a family friend or anyone you've received services or given services to, like a therapist. So keep it professional or academic. Also, we'll need all your academic transcripts. So again, it has to be from both undergraduate and graduate study. It can be unofficial with the application. So if you have copies that you can upload to our application portal, that's fine. If you need to request a transcript from a university and they are going to charge you a fee, we would recommend that you have it sent officially. So that means directly from that school to our office, UB School of Social Work, either through snail mail to our office in Baldy Hall, or if they can do an electronic transcript, many schools send it through Parchment or other electronic services. Provide them. Our email is swinfo@buffalo.edu, just to make sure it comes to the School of Social Work and doesn't by mistake go to undergraduate admissions. So make sure you give them our email address for our office. Number 2 would be your personal statement essay. So there are specific questions to address on the admissions tab right on our website. We're not looking to just see, if you're prepared for doctoral level study. We do want to make sure you're a good fit for the program here at UB as well. The focus is implementation science, and want to make sure that's what you're looking for as well in a program. We are not teaching advanced clinical skills, so please research our program and discuss why it would be a good fit with your goals within that personal statement. The next item, your resume or CV. If you haven't updated that in a while, that's one item to put on the checklist. Add that to your application too. The DEI and perseverance statement, we're looking for examples of how you have overcome obstacles in the past and persevered, as well as your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in your life and social work practice. There are also essay prompts on our website to respond to with that statement. The APA writing sample should be your work, obviously a sole authored paper. It could be an academic paper from your MSW degree, or an original paper if you don't happen to have that anymore, if you didn't graduate recently. It should be a reflection of your current writing ability. There's no page limit, but an average length for that item would be about 10 pages for the writing sample. And then we will also need proof of social work licensure or the waiver statement explaining why you are not currently licensed. next. The access to target population attestation, I mentioned before. So it's really just a brief form to attest you have access to the target population for the capstone. There's no way to know exactly what your project would be about since you haven't learned about implementation science yet. At times, the population could be staff members of the agency as the target population, or other agencies and not necessarily clients as the target population. So we do want you to name an agency on that form where you intend to implement your capstone and your relationship with that agency if you're working there or if it's private practice. So everything will be uploaded to the application portal once you submit the application form. It's basically 2 parts. So once you submit, there's going to be a checklist showing the documents you still need to upload. If it has a green check mark, we received it. If it has a red X, we are still missing that item for you. And at any point, you can submit your application fee. It would be $100 to apply to the DSW program. And then for any international applicants, we may require official English proficiency scores. That should be from within the last 2 years. The minimum scores are posted on our website for TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo. If you have questions about that, feel free to let us know. If you feel you may be eligible for an English proficiency waiver, we can go through those details also. And then we've got another slide on tuition and funding. So current tuition, our part-time online students for DSW are billed per credit hour. If you are a New York State resident, and that means you've resided in New York State for at least the last 12 months, we'll need 3 documents to show that. The rate would be $966.16. And then we have another rate if you're outside of New York State or an international student. And that's about $12.91 per credit hour. So you're generally taking 2 classes per semester part-time. So if you want an average cost per semester, you would just multiply that number by 6, right? And then over the 3 years, the program is 39 credits total. So if you're looking for a total cost, you would multiply it times 39. So how do we pay for this program? That's the big question. It is generally a self-funded program, but there are common ways that students tend to fund this program. So one suggestion we always make is ask your employer. Possibly they have a program for tuition reimbursement or scholarships towards doctoral level study. It doesn't hurt to ask. Check that out. We do also have a UB Office of Veterans Affairs, and they assist students with their VA benefits. So definitely reach out to them if that's the case for your family. Students have access to low interest federal loans by completing the FAFSA application. So the one main difference, and I'm sure you found this out during the MSW degree, is that grants go away, unfortunately, the free money, but you can still have access to student loans. So typically you may be eligible for up to $20,500 per year in student loans. So that will definitely help support funding the program. A couple other creative ways to fund the degree. So practicum waivers are available if you would be willing to oversee a current MSW student at UB completing their practicum. So the waiver is works towards tuition for a 3-credit course at the MSW tuition rate, and it can be applied towards your DSW tuition. So it wouldn't cover the full amount, but it does. It is applied to your overall tuition bill. So you can reach out to our practicum education office. Their email is sw-field@buffalo.edu. So I'll share that email at the very end if you need it. So that would be a practicum waiver. The other option on the screen would be teaching as an adjunct instructor for our MSW coursework. So it works similar to a part-time job. You don't get benefits through the union. You would just get a paycheck for, working teaching that course. So the contact person would be our MSW program director, Isak Kim, currently is the director. So I can provide contact information as well if you're interested in serving as an adjunct. So everyone's different with how they fund their degree, but these are some common sources. If you have more questions, let me know. And then just some contact information after tonight. I'm Tara. My email is there on the screen, tkegley@buffalo.edu. Our office email is there as well, swinfo@buffalo.edu. If you have questions on the application, you can direct it to that email. Dr. Louanne Bakk, her contact information is there, as well as connecting with our amazing DSW ambassadors. There's a QR code that brings you to the link on our website where you can chat and send them messages and get in touch with them after this evening.